The single biggest challenge I think that we're seeing is the reinvention of how advertising works. I think traditionally advertising has been very passive, disruptive, and people have had advertising put into their TV shows or into content that they're viewing. And I think actually what we're seeing now is this shift towards active, and people can choose what they consume. The consumer is in control of what they spend time with. It's moved from passive, disruptive model to active, and we need to fundamentally change how we build communications to engage a consumer and earn their attention.
What we're seeing is that people who are joining organizations, big and small, want to know what the purpose of that organization is, beyond simply pleasing investors, but understanding what their mission is. It applies for every single organization that's here today. They want to find the right people that are driven to support purpose and mission, because if you have that, you can wake up and give extra every single day.
I think the critical challenge for marketing is the critical challenge for business, which is to do with capacity. And we see limits on capacity, whether that's economic capacity, information capacity, environmental capacity, just the sheer supply of raw materials. In the next 10 years, capacity is going to be the really big challenge. So finding growth when that capacity isn't there. I think marketers and businesses will have to look for growth in uncomfortable places. I think it will not be the same old, same old. They'll be looking for niches, they'll be looking for communities, they'll be looking for what in the old days we might have thought of as relatively small opportunities that they can grow. The mass market will not function as the mass market anymore.
Our view on the future of marketing, and this is from General Assembly's perspective as an education company that is really focused on providing individuals with the skills that they need to be successful in marketing in the future, is that it's really becoming a lot more data-driven. This is probably the biggest change and shift that we have seen in the marketing industry. If you look at the skills that were required in the past for a marketer, it was a lot more about conceptualization, it was a lot more subjective. Today, a marketer needs to have quantitative data analysis, maths skills to be successful, and that's a real shift. So we're really excited about being able to contribute to the curriculum that's going to be needed to train people in that skill, but that's probably the biggest future shift that we're seeing.
So for today's marketeer, the question is, how do I make use of algorithms, AI, deep learning, machine learning, to make sense of all of that information? Because actually today's competitive advantage comes from algorithms. Any product or service can be replicated within 6 months. There's not the competitive advantage that the business once had, but you have competitive advantage when it comes to data and algorithms. Nobody can replicate your data. You can use algorithms on top of that data to create insight that your competitors don't have. So in tomorrow's future, it's the algorithm that's the next billion-dollar unicorn. It's the algorithm that will create differentiation. And so for marketeers, it's trying to understand, what are the tools and technologies? What's the environment I need to be able to enable to become more data-driven, to be able to harness these algorithms?
I think the impact of technology is an obvious one. I think changing consumer behavior. And then there's also a question around trust in brands and consumer perception of brands. All of those and more are things that we've got to look at. First of all, recognize the changes that are happening, try and stay ahead of them if they can. The marketing profession is one that's emerging very quickly, and so our own organization has to change as technology moves in, as consumer behavior changes. So your organization has to adapt. And as a brand owner, you also try and make sure that your brands continue to stay relevant and can communicate with consumers in the most appropriate way.
I think the critical challenge that we're facing at Allianz is probably one that's common to a lot of organisations, but it's how you really maintain your core business, the thing that's paying the bills, the thing that's driving the business today, and yet put some of your best people on the future of the business, the things that are going to transform you tomorrow. And I think balancing the two is a real challenge for us, and I think it's very much a marketing challenge as well.